oil in the sanctuary is a metaphor for the thoughts of the mind. Now, you may not know this, that a lamp, an oil lamp, has three parts. There is ner. Ner is the receptacle, is the vessel that holds the oil. Psila, the wick. And shemen, the oil. These are the three parts, the receptacle, the wick, and the oil. Ner, psila, shemen. The Rashi Tevis, the first letters of those three words, ner, psila, shemen, spell nefesh, spell the soul. Right? That the oil lamp is really the soul. Now, the truth is that it's a very apt metaphor, because the truth is this. The truth is that in the soul, in the rational part of the soul, we take ideas that we learn and we allow them to expand and grow and illuminate the world around us. In other words, from basic axioms, we can generate magnificent systems of knowledge, which is essentially what the lamp does. The lamp takes the potential energy contained in the oil, harnesses that to provide illumination that can spread far and wide. That's what the soul does. So it's a very, very apt metaphor. So when it says that the Greeks defile the oil in the sanctuary, that's a metaphor for defiling the thoughts of the mind. The mind of the Jewish people was corrupted. And this was a very great danger. And the Jews who were still faithful fought with tremendous sacrifice to resist this alien intrusion.
In this metaphor, there was one cruise.
That's right, because that's the idea. There always is something left. In other words, there always is a small corner of the Jewish soul which cannot be tainted. That's the pach shem, that's the little cruse of oil, which is sealed with the seal of the high priest. There is an area of the Jewish soul which is inviolate. There is something which can't be contaminated, it can't be ruined. And that's ultimately why the Greeks lose. Right? Because there is something in the Jewish soul which can't be corrupted. Yes?
I just wanted to ask, in the time of Chanuka, when all this was happening, wasn't it, if the Jews continued to practice, wasn't it on pain of death? Weren't they killed? Wasn't it, so they were physically threatened as well?
Sure, but you have to keep in mind that what was the objective? In other words, let's say, for example, I want you to embrace a certain ideology. So I say, if you don't, I'm going to kill you. Okay, now, not you. Now, the objective is not to kill anybody, right? The objective is really to people to wisen up and act in their own self-interest.
Or
right?
you could say, if you practice Judaism, then I'll kill you.
Well, that's what they're saying. They're saying like this. You see, when the Greeks make these decrees, they really feel they're doing you a favor. In other words, sometimes they just have to threaten you to get you to act in your own self-interest. But it's just like, the Catholic missionaries with Indians. It's the same thing. In other words, we are bringing you civilization. We are bringing you culture. We are bringing you enlightenment. I mean, if you refuse to be enlightened, we have no choice but to massacre you. But we're really doing this for your good. Right? That's
God
the
holds the mountain over our heads.
Pardon?
God holds the mountain over our heads.
Same idea. Now, so we understand this. I don't want to step further. Back to that same text in the Talmud. The Talmud says that is Chachmas Yavanis forbidden? Is the wisdom of the Greeks forbidden? And the Gemara brings that quotation from Rebbe. Rebbe was the author of the Mishnah. And Rebbe said like this, that there was a time in Israel where it was fashionable to speak a certain language called Lashon Sursi. Sursi was a jargon language. It was a corruption of some other language. And Rebbe was bemoaning the fact that people were speaking in such unrefined ways. So he says, the Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, Lashon Sursi Lama. Why should anybody speak that language? Oh, Lashon HaKodesh. Either you should speak Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, the Holy Tongue, or Lashon Yavanis, or speak Greek. But don't speak jargon, don't speak Lashon Sursi. But apparently Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi said the Greek you're allowed to speak. So how can you tell me the Chachmas Yavanis, the wisdom of Greece, is forbidden? Rabbi himself said either speak Hebrew or speak Greek. So the Gemara gives the obvious answer, that there's Chachmas Yavanis, the wisdom of Greece, is one thing, and the Greek language is something else. In other words, the wisdom of Greece, Greek philosophy, that's forbidden. But Greek language, that's permitted. Simple answer. But the answer is so simple, it's hard to understand what the question was. In other words, when you learn Gemara, one of the things you always ask is, what is the Hava Amina? What is what I thought? In other words, we have a question, you give an answer. But if the answer is too obvious, it raises the question, what was the question in the first place? And we're posing a contradiction. On the one hand, they made a rule. Accursed is the person who teaches his son Chachmas Yavanis, the wisdom of the Greeks. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi said that a person is allowed to speak Greek. So what's the contradiction? Obviously, we're talking about Greek philosophy. This is Greek language. What's the contradiction? So I'd like to say something very, 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 very fundamental. An idea, a very powerful idea. But it's not an original idea. But there was a linguist, I believe he was a professor in Yale, died in 1941. His name was Worf, W-H-O-R-F, Worf, Benjamin Lee Worf. And Worf had an idea which is enshrined in the literature of linguistics called the Worfian hypothesis. The Worfian hypothesis. What is the Worfian hypothesis? It's like this. If I were to ask you, what's the purpose of language? What is the purpose of language? Most people would say language is the vehicle by which we communicate to other people. Okay? If I want to communicate to you, I do it through language. Worf said no. That's certainly part of it. But language is also the vehicle with which we think. In other words, we think in a language. Higher level thinking, abstract thinking, is really an internal conversation. We are talking to ourselves. Well, not with our mouths. I mean, people that do that are considered insane. But in reality, when we're thinking through a problem, we are having an internal conversation. We are talking to ourselves in a language. So the Worfian hypothesis is that English people think in English, Chinese people think in Chinese, French people think in French, Canadians think bilingually, at least some do, right? But you think in a language. And therefore the value of language is not only that it's the vehicle of communication to others, it is really the vehicle with which you think yourself. You think in a language. Now, I'll just mention two very interesting tidbits of information related to this. Because one is an observation that I picked up many, many years ago. This is really a popular book. You're all over Oliver Sacks, famous writer, medical, scientific issues. So he wrote a book some years back about the deaf. And the various approaches to overcoming the difficulties of being deaf, sign language versus learning to speak. And there was a little fact that was contained in this book, which is that people that are born deaf, who do not develop language skills, have a deficiency in their powers of abstract reasoning. That's one of those little facts you file away for a later date. And it's exactly consistent with the Worfian hypothesis. Because if you think in a language, if you don't have language, it isn't just you can't communicate to other people, but you are really at a disadvantage in terms of your own ability to think. I want to point out that I believe that this is the real interpretation of a Targum Onkelos. It's really that this idea, the Worfian hypothesis, really is from Chazal. It reminds me of a joke. It's not a joke, it's a story. There was a great Gaon, the Rogatchover. You ever heard the Rogatchover Gaon? He was a tremendous Gaon. He was nifter. He passed away in the 30s. Pardon? In Dvinsk. So they told the story that when Einstein published his papers on relativity, they came to him and they asked him, what do you say about Einstein relativity? So supposedly the Rogatchover answered, it's the Yerushalmi in Ksubas. That's what he said. But the whole thing is not no big deal. It's the Yerushalmi. Anyway, so the Worfian hypothesis, I believe, is really a Targum Onkelos. As we know in the Chumash, it says when God created man, it says that God formed man from the earth, and He blew into him the breath of life, and he became a nefesh chaya, a living being. So the Targum Onkelos says that a living being should be translated as ruach mamalva, a speaking being. The Ramban explains that really, at least on the level of animal, man was alive by virtue of his formation from the earth. When God blew into him the breath of life, that was the injection of unique human characteristics. Therefore, Onkelos translates that expression, a living being, as a speaking being, because he already was a living being. The breath of life added to him the dimension of speech. That's what the Ramban explains to Onkelos. Very, very good. But it always puzzled me that if I would ask you, what is the unique characteristic of a human being that separates a human being from the animal? I would not have said that it's the power of speech. I would have said it's the power of thought. So Onkelos should have translated Nefesh Chaya not as a speaking being, but as a thinking being. What is the answer? It's the same thing. In other words, the Worfian hypothesis is that essentially a thinking being is a speaking being. So that's who you're speaking to. You're speaking to yourself. Now, Worf pointed out, I believe correctly, that there are many consequences of this. Because every language, there are subtle differences in the connotations of words and languages. And words don't translate well from language to language. What a word means in one language doesn't mean the same thing in another language. I'll give you several examples. The word laughter. In English, laughter is a very positive thing. Laughter is a good thing. Laughter, it's good to laugh. No. What is the Hebrew word for laughter? Psichok. Psichok is laughter. But anyone who reads the Chumash knows that the word psichok always has the connotation of putting someone down, humiliating somebody, making fun of something. It's different. Now, in English, laughter is desirable. In Hebrew, psichok is undesirable. It's something you want to avoid. Another example I always point out is the word fun. Lashon HaKodesh does not have a word for fun. No such word. It's fun. Modern Hebrew have to invent it. Kef. Right? If you're having a really great time, Ezer Shigaon, like what insanity it is. Right? But that's exactly correct. Fun is insanity. The crazier you are, the more fun it is. Right? But Lashon HaKodesh is the language of reality. It's the language of people who are deeply rooted in reality. And therefore, the word fun doesn't exist. The word simcha exists. Simcha is much different than fun. Simcha is satisfaction, is contentment, is joy, sublime joy, is simcha. That's reality. That's the reality of a life well lived. That isn't fun. You know, you go to an amusement park, and you go on the roller coaster, and you go down, and you feel you left your neshama back up there, right? And you feel alive only because they've created the illusion of your being virtually dead. I mean, that's fun, but that's not fun to a Jew. That's not fun in the Torah's eyes. Right? It certainly has no connection to Simcha. So, we see, languages are very, very funny things. And therefore, if you think in a certain language, you'll think certain ways about things. If you think in a different language, you'll think different ways about things. So the Gemara is half of me. Now we understand what the Gemara is saying. If the Gemara doesn't want you to think like a Greek, the Gemara says you shouldn't even talk like a Greek. In other words, they made a curse. Cursed is the person who teaches his son the wisdom of Greece. So how could you speak Greek? If you speak Greek, isn't it inevitable that you'll think like a Greek? It's a good question. What's the Gemara's answer? He says, no, you can still speak Greek as a second language. Because what do you think in? You always think in your mamaloshim. You think in your original language. To speak is a second language, it's a second language, but you're still thinking in the original language.